Welcome to the Peacebuilding Practitioner, a resource page and podcast for people working on conflict, on peacebuilding, and on social justice issues. My name is Björn Eser, and I'm the founder of and shaker and maker behind the Peacebuilding Practitioner. Welcome back to Season 3 of the Peacebuilding Practitioners podcast. Season 3 is all about digital peacebuilding, this highly complex, tremendously exciting, often messy and quickly developing intersection where emerging technologies and the digital world on the one hand and conflict transformation, peacebuilding, human rights and social justice work on the other hand meet. Today, I have the pleasure for this episode to talk with Nina Strumpf. Nina Strumpf is a peacebuilding and conflict transformation expert for the last 15 years, I guess, if I'm not misinformed. She's currently based in Berlin, but she has a track record also working in the Middle East, in Nepal, and she can draw on first-hand experiences on the practical level as well as on research and on the policy level. Nina, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Björn. I'm really happy to be here today.
That's great. I mean, I gave it a little introduction. Is there anything else you want the audience to know about yourself, and what's your position at the moment?
Yeah, hello again, everyone. My name is Nina, and I'm currently working at the Berghof Foundation, and I'm also working for the platform Peaceful Conflict Transformation, and I'm seconded to Free End, which is a working group at Peace and Development. It's another network organization. So I'm working in a kind of a complex network.
That sounds like an exciting setup with 2 or 3 legs to stand on and play with. Great. Yes. Nina, I approached you for this digital peacebuilding podcast because I recently read a report, a new research, which was called Sealing the Cracks, an intersectional feminist perspective on digital peacebuilding. That sounds very interesting. Who are the people behind this research, this new report? Who commissioned it? And what was the motivation to actually get it done?
Yes, Sealing the Cracks report. So my colleague from the platform Peaceful Conflict Transformation and Berghof Foundation, we were looking at the emerging field of digital peacebuilding. And actually we saw a lot of opportunities, but also risks of digital peacebuilding. And then in parallel, we've been following the recent discussion on the feminist foreign policy in Germany and in other countries. So looking at this development together, our idea was to explore how intersectional feminist lens helps to also amplify the opportunities and reduce the risks of digital peacebuilding. Yeah, so we were hoping that this lens can help to increase awareness on equalities and discriminatory power structures that are also reproduced in the digital sphere. We were both thinking this is important for peace building and also can inform policies. And then actually we were looking at partners who conduct the study for us. And then we're very fortunate we found Build Up, and they agreed to conduct the study. And Build Up is a leading organization in digital peace building. So they have a lot of experience on digitalization, but also on peace building and with grassroots organization and international organizations. So also this report is very much informed also by their experience.
Oh, great. Yeah. And actually, I'm currently in communication with Build Up. They might actually be one of them, might be a guest on one of the next shows, which is great. And for other people who want to learn more about Build Up, I think they have an exciting conference coming up in Nairobi in the 1st or 2nd week of December this year. So lots of interesting stuff happening, and obviously a really experienced and an insightful partner to work on such a study. That's great.
Yeah, I'm also really excited that I'm able to go to the conference in Kenya.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Last year, the conference was in Chemnitz in Germany.
Yeah.
And Björn, you were also part of this conference, and there were a lot of peace builders coming together from all over the world and discussing challenges and also opportunities in digital peace building.
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed the one in Chemnitz, but I went to Lochem where we met last time. Yeah. But unfortunately, Kenya is out of my reach at the moment, budget-wise. But I'm sure that's going to be an exciting conference. Nina, to look at this rather complex approach to looking at digital peacebuilding, can we probably just get started to make sure you and I and our audience have a joint understanding of what are we actually talking about when we talk about this complex topic? What was your approach, your definition, your terminology when you actually talk about digital peacebuilding? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So in our understanding, digital peace building goes beyond just using digital tools as an add-on in project planning and implementation. So it's not about like, oh, now everyone is talking about AR and artificial intelligence, and now we want to have it also in our project because it's there's funding available. And also it goes beyond just using information technology like Skype, Telegram, or WhatsApp to ensure communication between the projects and the project teams. So actually for us, digital peace building is an emerging body of practice with complement. I mean, this is important for us offline work towards the peace building objectives. So actually we always see it's important that online work also goes together with offline work because it showed that it has the best results also in the peace building work. And then there's this different another component also to look at digital conflict drivers and how the peace building can support and to overcome these digital drivers.
Yeah.
As for example, disinformation, hate speech, cyberbullying, or violence by state actors.
So making sure on the analysis, on the understanding phase, we're aware of new components, new trends, actually new strong forces when we actually look at analyzing conflicts, understanding the dynamics, but at the same time also seeing emerging technology, the digital realm, and other tech as a key component to actually get peace building done. And as you said, be complementary to face-to-face traditional methods and not just the tactical side where you say, okay, we can't meet, let's just move things to an online space, but it's an integral part to actually make peace building work.
Yes,
Great.
exactly.
So we looked at the peace building part. So now the Sealing the Crack has in the title the peace building work, but also the intersectional feminist perspective. What's the understanding you used for intersectional feminism?
Yeah, so let me first start to elaborate a bit on the term intersectionality. So the term intersectionality was originally coined by the lawyer Kimberly Crenshaw already in 1989 to describe basically bias and violence against Black women. So this term is not a new one. And so she used this famous picture of the street crossing that symbolized the overlapping and multi-layered and a complex form of discrimination. So in the beginning, it was mainly limited to academic and legal circles. But now it's became actually widely used and incorporate an intersection of gender biases, not only with race, but also with LGBTQI, class, age, religion, and disability issues, among others. So that means actually social political identities overlap and intersect with each other and create a new unique individual experiences, which makes the degree of inequality different for everyone. So simply speaking, that means a girl in a rural area from a minority group will face different challenges in life as a middle class lesbian girl in urban areas. Yeah. And also they have different access to health service, internet connection, and education.
Yeah.
So there was actually Kimberly Crenshaw was in Berlin a couple of years ago, and there she said intersectionality is a way of seeing, thinking, and acting, and it's the lens through which you can see where power comes and collides, and where it interlocks and intersects. So as she said, different life realities of people and analyzing discriminatory power and structures behind this and act upon it. So this is actually for us also the key concept. So that's why we came up with a definition. Sorry for this long.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect.
So intersectional feminist also in this paper, how we understand it is actually a lens, what you can observe and analyze, and how different aspects of social and political identities can create overlapping and unique form of discrimination. And this we need to consider when we do our peace building project. Yeah. So seeing, thinking, acting, I think this is actually also an easy way to understand the concept.
Yeah. And I think, that two things which resonate with me right away. I mean, on the one hand, I think people active in the wider peace building, conflict transformation, also human rights and social justice work, we always deal with complexity, often with very messy, quickly changing complexity. And in our understanding phase, we're always faced between this. How do we make sure we don't get lost in all the details and suddenly have lots and lots and lots of details which paralyze, kind of this deer in the headlights syndrome, where I think, okay, and now what? And at the same time, where we simplify but don't oversimplify and don't compartmentalize. And I think here really important is this overlapping identities. How does it in a systemic way interact with each other? And what does it mean on the theoretical concept? And it's another thing where sometimes as a practitioner, I'm a bit frustrated when I see, okay, there are all these great concepts which work nicely in an air-conditioned room with a coffee break and everything. But what does it mean on the acting side? How do I translate new insights into actual relevant, meaningful, powerful piecework? And I think this is where I was quite struck by. I thought the Sealing the Cracks gives me new thought ideas, but probably also gives me new hands-on practical hints on where could I change current practice, and as you said, practice and policy.
Yes. I know. I just wanted to add also, we had then a launching event for the report, and also one of the participants or the speaker said then it's also become sometimes almost overwhelming to have all this concept and so what to do with it. So, and also that's why we try to break it down in the Sealing the Cracks report also with a lot of examples how it actually can be implemented.
Yeah. Great. So now that we have your understanding, and by your, I mean the people involved in doing this research and presenting it in Germany and to an international audience. So if we now bring this together, if we bring the new important perspective into the discussion, and what does it mean for this emerging field of digital peace building? Whatever that means, we're still, I think also in the peace building field, we're still navigating a labyrinth here. What do we actually mean by digital peace building? But you explained it earlier. So what's the relevance and how does it all come together if we bring the insights out here?
Yeah, so maybe I repeat myself a little bit here, but I mean, for us, it's also to have this intersectional feminist lens, also to help to tackle reoccurring challenges in peace building, also in the offline and online world, because also we see it actually always a little bit together. And this intersectional feminist lens helps to look at the complex reality of people's life and the effects of multiple discrimination of privilege, also what you said. So, and also what's really important there is also to placing the concerns of the marginalized group at the center. So, so you don't look at the youth as a one group, but you start to see different challenges youth face due to the different identity markers. And this is particularly important as the hope of digitalization would promote inclusion and equality has been actually not been true, that because the mechanism of what's happening in the offline world is often reproduced in the digital sphere. So, for example, if you look at LGBTQ activists, the social media gave a great platform to advocate for decriminalization. But on the other hand, also it put them at risk, not only online, but also offline.
Just where you said you're looking at this, okay, how do we actually replicate existing unjust structures, unjust power structures, exposure to risk, exposure to harm, and where did we had hopes for the digital realm, for the non-kinetic world, where we said, oh, maybe that shifts ownership, maybe that shifts safety and security issues, maybe that also shifts agency and power issues. And I think there were some promising developments, but also there were very soon some sobering insights. And can you probably give us a couple examples? What does it mean in terms of these, as you said, access discrimination, vulnerability risks, and how does it play out? Yeah, and where's the connection between the digital realm and actually the offline, the kinetic world?
Yeah, for example, look at if you look at, I mean, we define 4 dimensions, and one of them is bias data collection.
Yeah.
And so there we should critically question which data is being used or collected to be aware of the biases it entails. For example, a binary question like yes and no in research do no justice to very complex social issues. For example, trans people and hate crimes directed to LGBTQ people are not captured in the data. So we always can see how it links the real world. Of course, it's also, I mean, people will be seen in the data. So another aspect is that the organizations are increasingly using artificial intelligence to further speed up data collecting processes. And then fast data collection processes enabled by digital technology can often miss the intersectional perspective and present biases pictures of a need or opinion. For example, I mean, I think most people know this example, that AI face recognition software misidentified often people of colors.
Yeah.
And and also now, like kind of a practical example and a way forward also is, for example, participatory processes with communities while collecting data can help. For example, there's this project called Everyday Indicators, where they try to include voices of marginalized groups, for example, in South Africa and other countries. So they just used mobile devices so people could actually inform the researchers about their opinion. on everyday peace indicators. So sometimes it's just like very easy tools how to engage and how to include people. So that doesn't need to be sophisticated platforms or techniques.
But what you said, I think it's so important, especially for people who are not kind of the tech geeks or following all the developments and are more on the user side of tech. And very often also very comfortable, convenient tech when we're not even aware what does it mean for the bigger picture. And you just mentioned data biases. And I think there's really some great work and also recently some work which is more easily available also on, let's say, general audience platforms like Netflix. And so there's Joy from I think Algorithm Justice League, who really, I think, was one of the pioneers of saying, what does it mean in terms of having data that is collected, that is used, and what does it mean in terms of translating that into policy, into practices, into processes which affect our day-to-day life. And so someone who's really interested in that might check that out, or the book Weapons of Math Destruction, I think, which looks at the whole algorithm and which data is fed into it and how does it affect sentencing lengths and policing and access to loans and all the things. I think it's really important to get a better understanding of that. But also where you said, well, very often it's very simple things we do anyway, and how can we make better use and better informed use of mobile devices, of platforms we use anyway, for peace building, for social justice work. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned some of the things like we just said, biased data, access discrimination. And access discrimination can mean the sheer access to broadband, to devices, to platforms, but it can also mean access where I say, well, I have the access, but I feel because of my identity, because of a rather hateful environment, yes, I have the physical access or I have the knowledge access, but I still don't have proper access because I'm bullied, I'm harassed, I'm not feeling safe once I'm active there. And I think it's really important to also be clear, what do we mean by these gender access divides? Is it the usage divide or is it the feeling safe divide?
Yes, I mean, this is a really important point. And also, if you have access also shaped by different identity markers, for example, poverty, increased poverty also has mean usually that you have less access to connectivity or devices. And for example, it's still the case that even though the gender gap in internet connectivity is less, but still less women than men have access to internet.
Yeah.
And then also you have this urban and rural divide again.
If I just try to explore that a bit further, like what are some of the problems, to be very generic on that side? I mean, we're probably looking at structural problems, structural and cultural problems. We're looking at personal problems, but I think it's also important to look at it in terms of what does it mean in the very environment we're active. So is it in a more or less open rule of law, democratic environment, or is it an authoritarian regime where I also have to really be very careful? What does it mean in terms of using digital platforms for free speech, for opinion forming in an environment where I'm not sure in how far is that used against me from a state actor, and not just from a bully, but in a really systematic way from a state actor. Did you also take that into account in your research?
We take into account, and also we have like different examples. I mean, digital risk as cyberbullying, being victim of hate speech, or being trackable through activities on social media. This is all things we mentioned in the report. And also interesting is that, for example, cyberbullying online, it even increases. I mean, some statistics say that it also increases the risk of, I mean, first of all, suicide thought, but also suicides. And also you can see again the connection of the offline and online world.
Yeah.
And in some spaces, for example, I mean, online spaces, especially in regards to sexualized and gender insults, especially like, as you said, also less safe for women, people of colors, and LGBTQ. And also the risk of deep fakes is an issue, and especially most deep fakes are pornographic, and this affects again mainly women. But also then you have the digital footprint that you leave, and it can put people at risk. Especially, for example, the dating apps in Egypt have been used to track and arrest torture members who've been using it. So, I mean, there's a great risk around it.
Thank you for bringing us on board here and sharing some of the insights and some of the case studies or examples from the report. Now that we probably have a better idea on what the problem is, I'm really interested in how does it translate into something positive, into something where we see how can peace-building practitioners, people who work in communities, people who work on a national level, or people who work on the policy level, what are some implications, what are some recommendations that are coming out from that research, which you would like to share here in terms of using it for peace-building and conflict transformation work?
One thing that came out of the report is that, as I mentioned, all the risks, but it still can broadening participation and ownership. The study showed that people facing oppression are more likely to opt out, and with a digital alternative, they have sometimes more courage to speak out. And also, for example, a traditional peace negotiation, for example, often still mainly face to face, and often include rituals like alcohol consumption, which in many contexts also exclude people, and especially also often women. So then with bringing in online participation processes and mechanism, it helps also to reach those people who are usually excluded. For example, I just can give one example. The AI startup Ramesh supported a UN nation, for example, to have an online platform where they could ask also with AI questions, generate questions like open questions where people from the whole country could answer. And also this helped, for example, that more women did participate in the research. Another aspect is, for example, ensuring better safety. As we said, it's put at risk, but also you can put kind of measures inside when you're planning and implement and using online tools, for example, use this anonymity aspects. So that helps a lot that people can express themselves without being pointed to. And also it helps, for example, if people are very vocal in processes, it helps to people who are not so vocal to express themselves too. For example, one project was that they also by build up was that people were communicating via WhatsApp and you could only see the numbers. So it helped that also people were taken serious and their opinion was taken serious. This is not even from the peers, but also from the participants who are usually not so much heard.
I think that's really interesting here. And I think what you mentioned earlier is important. And we say, okay, this is seen as yet another complementary tool, way, method, option. And so I think it's great that now it just offers up, especially if we're well informed on how to best use it to not feed into power imbalances, further sidelining into all these negative dynamics in the kinetic world. But then we also say, okay, when do people feel safer, more encouraged, more appreciated when participating in the process? Is that online? Is that offline? Is that in a mixed group? Is that in an anonymous group? Is that in one where it's really process oriented, or is it in one-offs? And I think just having a broader spectrum available here and being aware of how can we tweak it that it's a conducive environment, no matter if it's on the analysis phase, it's on the implementation phase, it's on the feedback phase. And as you said, sometimes that's just due to personal reasons, that sometimes it's due to security reasons or the COVID lockdown reasons or others. And I think it's great that it can be used really on a community level, initiated by small groups where you just say, okay, if someone has a mobile device, that's enough. And used all the way up to the United Nations, like consultative programs in Libya recently around peace agreements and broadening the whole process. And I think being aware of it's not an either or, but it's trying to be a more complementary, more holistic approach and offering something which is closer to people's preferred way of engagement and taking their identities and their fears and worries and their preferred way of engaging into account. And I think that's something where we're sometimes lacking behind, especially when we're challenged and it's portrayed as it's supposed to replace other methods, but it's complementary.
Yes, and also sometimes it can help if people can't attend a workshop in person because it's too far travel, or they have to work, or for example, some people even not allowed to travel. So this can help also to bring people in who are usually excluded, and then you can even, and that's why it's important again to bring the analysis in, so you can look at first with whom you want to approach and what is their realities, and how can you then tailor this approaches that the people really able to engage. For example, one example is if you work, for example, with mobile devices with some marginalized groups and women, for example, sometimes they can't use their devices freely because they're observed by their relatives. So you have to set the timing and that time where they're alone and use the advices without being imposed to risk.
Yeah. Nina, time is slowly coming to an end. So we now talked about some of the risks. We talked some of the just better understanding the context and what does it mean with this emerging field of using emerging tech and digital realms more often. We looked at some of the implications for our piecework and where there is actually added value and where we can actually use the potential benefits or offer these potential benefits for people to use and then decide by themselves. Are there any real recommendations coming out where you say, well, either towards the policy level or the funding level or the practitioners level, is there something where you say, well, and these are some of the things we're really our call to action, our recommendations?
Yeah. I mean, the recommendations in the end are not new, but they're really important. I mean, for example, one recommendation for the practitioner is, again, using a human-centered design. I mean, this is just key. So it's essential to include people with a diverse background to the project design and testing. And it should be analyzed who's being harmed by the technology, who benefits from it, and who is over and underrepresented.
Yeah.
And also we should reflect then also on our own privilege. I mean, especially coming from the Western world and white saviorism. I think this is also a very important element. Another one is we should not forget, always prioritize people's online safety and security also over our curiosity if we want to learn maybe about marginalized groups. But we should not put them at risk, and this should be always the first priority. And then, I mean, I mentioned it already a couple of times. It's important to see which digital tools can you use for which purpose. And then usually all the practical examples show that it's important to have this offline component mixed with the online component. I mean, if possible, it's not possible all the time, but I mean, to think about how can you arrange and can get also the strength, the personal connection is the important element. For the policy level, policymakers and technology companies should be held responsible also to ensure the safety of marginalized groups. And they should push for legal reforms in the area of data rights, IA, and platform regulations. I mean, as we know, I mean, we didn't touch upon it today in this discussion, but we know that, I mean, especially hateful content is amplified in social media due to their structures. Yeah. So this needs to change.
Yeah.
And then last thing about funding, and this is also not a new recommendation, but I think it's always important to point to that. I mean, funding should be flexible, so you can always, while you're doing a project, and also, I mean, how the circumstances change a lot, as we know in the current world. I mean, world is standing upside down. You need to be flexible and adjust the projects to the circumstances, and this is important. And also, donors should actually engage with this platform because they have the power and to engage with them and push also for the reforms, as I just mentioned.
Yeah, great. What you said, some of the insights, some of the recommendations are, let's say, pretty straightforward on the one hand. On the other hand, we very often forget, and I think especially this, what you said, let's make sure it's a human-centered design. It's something where it's built around human needs and the person in the middle. And I think that's something we sometimes forget when there are all these flashy new opportunities, when there's a tyranny of tools, so to speak, but let's make sure it's human-centered. And the other one, I think, which goes hand in hand with that and where it's sometimes not really good at is this prior informed consent. Are people fully aware of what's the platform that is used? What are the risks involved? And can they make a decision before actually getting fully engaged on saying, well, actually, this is not for me, or because of personal reasons, because of cultural reasons, because of other reasons, I first want to be informed before making a commitment to engage with something. But also what you said, kind of the platforms, the tech giants, where what does it mean reining them in? What does it mean if their whole business model is built on engagement? And we all know that the extreme sides, that blood and sex sells, so to speak, that gets much more engagement than nuanced, very differentiated arguments, which need a bit more room, which might not be that attractive to quick consumerism. But there is the responsibility of politicians to actually make sure and constantly push against that. And I think it's really good to also now having that based in a new research, which looks on, let's say, on a global scale and which looks at it from a slightly different perspective at what we normally have. Great, Nina. So people who want to have a look at the original document, who actually say that was interesting, I want to read into the nitty-gritty details, where can they find it?
Yeah, of course, you can find the report on the website of Berghof Foundation and also on the website of the platform Peaceful Conflict Transformation, and I can share the link.
Yeah, that would be nice. Just send it to me and I'll make sure I put it in the show notes. So, and as you probably know, I warned you, I ask each and every one of my guests to also share one other resource around digital peace building, which is not straight from your own work or your own organization, but is there anything else you can recommend? There can be a video, a podcast, a training manual, a training opportunity, an event, an upcoming event, anything where you say, if you're into peace building, if you're into digital ways of peace building, this is something you should look at.
Yeah. I have a book I would like to recommend. It's not on digital peace building, but it's on data feminism. It's called The Seven Principles of Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignacio and Lauren Klein. And
Oh, cool.
it's provided an excellent framework for peace building, seeking also to rectify biased data collection. So they have 7 principles, for example, examine power structures and challenge power, but also rethinking minorities and hierarchies. So, I mean, this is really in line with the report.
Yeah.
I highly recommend the book.
Great. I'm going to also put that in the show notes, and I'm also going to check that out. I thought I already have quite a good book collection on anything relating to algorithms, math underpinning algorithms, on digital peace building, on clickbait capitalism. I haven't come across that one, so that's going to make it onto my list for the next couple of weeks of reading, or if there's an audiobook, listening to it. Thank you very much. Nina, it's been a real pleasure, and I think we could probably go on talking for another hour or so, but let's keep it with that for today. And who knows, maybe we meet each other again for another podcast show somewhere down the line. But for now, thank you very much. It's been a really exciting and rewarding interview from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Björn. Also, thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
So much for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of the future episodes. And I would really appreciate if you leave me a rating on iTunes, on Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more about the Peacebuilding Practitioner, head over to my webpage. That's www.thepeacebuildingpractitioner.org, where you find plenty of articles from practitioners for practitioners. And if you want to dive even deeper into this field of work, join us for one of our online courses. If you want to learn more about that, just get in contact with me. You find the contact details in the show notes or on my webpage.